Welcome to the Emerson Group Wealth Call for August 2024. My name is Nick Emerson, and I will be your host today, and the owner and operator of the Emerson Group, Real Estate Professionals, where we focus in rental property owner representation and an emphasis in the 1031 exchange. On today's Wealth Call, I'll be focusing on an introduction to 1031 exchange in order for you in the audience to uncover new options or considerations you might not have otherwise known, or maybe get a refresher on just the basics of a 1031 exchange and how you might be able to reconsider options in bettering yourself, your position, or your family's wealth. For a quick overview, we're going to go through just what is a 1031 exchange and how does it work? What are the guidelines and IRS requirements that you need to meet in order to successfully fulfill your exchange? Common reasons why investors use an exchange or motivations. We're going to go through a bonus of how you can help your child or family member buy a home using a 1031 exchange. And then we'll just recap what the benefits of a 1031 exchange are and how they might help you now or in the future. Before we get into a 1031 exchange and all the details, I want to start by the basics of the two types of properties. We have one that you live in, which is your primary residence, and we have one that you do not live in, which is your investment property. A primary residence does not qualify for a 1031 exchange. However, the benefit is you do get a $250,000 exclusion if single, or $500,000 if a married couple. So understand, remember, 1031 exchange is for properties that you do not live in. Now, what is a 1031 exchange? Well, according to the IRS, it's a transaction which permits an investor to defer the payment of capital gains tax by exchanging real property for like-kind real property of equal or greater value. Now, what do they mean by like-kind? Well, like-kind is a very misconstrued notion because it's not about the property type. It's about the function. So how does your property function? Well, is it qualified use of the property for investment or business use? Good, because then you qualify for a 1031 exchange. Now, what can I 1031 exchange into? Well, as you can see, a lot of options. And this goes back to the like kind. I want to reaffirm that. These properties or functions or options are all held for investment or business use. And that is the mechanism that qualifies it for you to accomplish a 1031 exchange. As you can see, there's plenty of options. A detached home, multifamily, apartment buildings, senior housing, billboards, solar farms, oil and gas rights. We went over that a few calls earlier. Cemetery plots, which I trust none of you are in the business of exchanging or trading on a consistent basis. The example I wanted to give here is just to show you guys the like kind and the property type and in regards to how it works. Well, in this example, our client Lillian lived in Idaho and had two condos here in San Diego that she was renting out. Now, in this example, the main thing I want to convey here is that she took two condos and turned it into a detached home. Yes, that's legal. That's like kind, because again, we're focusing on two rentals into one rental. So from a tax standpoint, right, the position held is the same, but in a different asset. Right? I'm taking my position here in these rental properties for investment use. I'm putting my money into an exchange accommodator who's then holding my money when I sell, right? It's going to go to them and not me. Therefore, there's no taxable event. And then during the time period I'm identifying and looking to close on it, that's when the accommodator is holding and retaining the money, such that that money will then go directly into the new property. Therefore, as the owner, you never touched the property with your hands in the money. They only went from the escrow to the 1031 exchange accommodator to the new reinvestment property. So in this example, what Lillian was able to do was a lot of things. And this goes back to some of the motivations and why people do a 1031 exchange. Well, Lillian was tired of dealing with management that had changed hands and was no longer serving her. She had one of the properties with eviction and would not leave the property. So in doing this, really, we accomplished a lot of the motivators, which is move the asset to the home state, so easier for her to manage, maintain, reduce the operating expenses and management burdens, because we took two tired condos from 50 plus years ago that were built and put it into a brand new detached home. So she's not going to get that phone call for a new water heater, a new air conditioning unit, a new roof, right? She's going to get the call that there's a small leak in a connection supply line for $100. And those are the kind of calls I prefer to get than the $20,000 roof call. So as you can see, again, simplified her real estate needs for herself and for her son. And she even increased her cash flow and was able to pull some money out of the exchange, which would be a partial exchange. So again, like kind is investment for investment. In this example, 2 condos into 1 house. And in some regard, this could be a house for 4 condos. It works either way. So there's a lot of different flexibility within this, as long as you're maintaining the integrity of the use of the property. All right, exchange guidelines and requirements. So as we said, the purchase, right, the value of the replacement property needs to be equal or greater than value from the sale in order for you to defer all taxes. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do it if it's less. If you look at the bottom of the slide here, partial exchange. Well, you could still do a partial exchange, meaning you can sell your property and reinvest into another property or properties at a lower value. In that instance, you're going to be paying taxes on the delta, or the difference between the two, lower amount that you invested into. So if you sold for $1 million and you bought a property or properties for $800,000, the $200,000 is what you'd be taxed on in that partial exchange. Next thing is the timelines. We have 45 days to identify a replacement property from the close of our sold property. We have 180 calendar days to close on the replacement property. Now, I'll go into more detail when we go through the timeline here, but main thing I want to convey is that your timelines in reality are much longer. And what I mean by that is when you're working with professionals like our team that specialize in this space, we're having these conversations months in advance, right? We're not even getting close to putting your home on the market yet until we know exactly what we're doing as far as our strategy, our target, and what makes the most sense. Getting into this visual for the timeline here, right? So there's a lot going on. What I want to do is start with just looking at the left-hand side for the R&D box. Research and development, right? This is when we are conducting our exploratory calls. We're going through, hey, what do you have? What's causing you to want to evaluate your options? What's that property worth? Right? What are the net proceeds we'd realize from that? And then what's the goal? Are we looking for an improved performance? Are we looking to relocate the asset? Are we looking to change from active to passive investing? There's a lot of reasons, and we want to get clear on what those are and that we have a suitable strategy for you before we actually put the property on the market. So, research and development on the left-hand side, this period from research and development to prep for sale, that could be looking at anywhere from 1 month to 4 months, depending on what clarity we have and what our target is for reinvesting. Now, during that time period, if we don't have that, that's exactly why we're looking at different markets throughout the US with our national network partners, with other Keller Williams team members. We're looking at different types of properties, or it just could be something as simple as, hey, I'd like to relocate the asset to my home state. And a lot of our clients don't live in San Diego. They did one time, but they don't now. And they realize they've got a tired property worth $1 million that's not really doing anything for them. So that's when we really put this together and help them understand the level of clarity and the target for reinvestment, so they feel good about taking the next step to list their home on the market. So during that time period from on market to sold, if we're taking today's market, you can generally expect about 60 days. Put it on the market between 2 to 4 weeks to garner a contract, a 30-day escrow, and also during that time period, we might be extending the escrow a few times and building that in so that you have even more time if you need it. So that's why I like to say the real time versus the IRS time. The IRS time is sell your property, you have 45 days to identify. Now, the Emerson Group timeline is more like 90 or 120 or 150 days because we're very clear on exactly what we're reinvesting into once we put your home on the market. Now, from day 0 to day 45, that's when we're out looking at properties or options that make sense for our plan. And now that might be here locally, or that might be out of state, and that might be in multiple locations at one time. But either way, our main target and goal is that we're actually closing escrow during this time period rather than waiting for 180 days. However, if you're not, and you're just figuring this out, well, you have 45 days from close of escrow to identify or sign paper with property addresses on it to send to your accommodator, your 1031 exchange accommodator. And we'll go through the ID sheet here in a moment as well, so you can get some more clarity on that. But as we go through the identification of 45 days, and then we hit our 180 days, we have already identified, found, put under contract, and are closing on your property within 6 months of closing your sale. So your relinquished property, the property you sold for the purpose of reinvesting. Day 1, right? I'm looking for properties to replace my $1 million detached home. During that time period, I could be writing offers, I could be under contract, or I could just be looking to wait till the last week to fully ensure I have the right properties identified. There's a lot of wiggle room within this, just depending on how far in advance you start on this research and development. Now, as we head into the identification rules, this would be, what are the options for you when you're identifying replacement properties? There's 3 different types of rules. Most commonly, though, the top 2 are the ones that are used 98% of the time. So the 3 property rule. You're identify 3 properties without regard to value, meaning I sold my 1 property and I'm putting down 3 addresses on paper that I intend to close on one of them or multiple of them. What's most important is once you put them on that sheet and the 45 days expires, you must close escrow on one of those properties. If you do not close escrow on one of those properties, you'll have a failed exchange. And that has yet to happen with one of our clients. So understand, this goes back to the research and development and knowing what your reinvestment target is. Therefore, these timelines are no longer as critical or as concerning. Next, we'll look at the 200% rule. Most often, in this example, you'd be using that. It's typically where you're going from a higher price point to a lower price point. And what I mean by that, let's say you sell a detached home in San Diego and you reinvest into a suburb in Texas. Well, if you're looking to sell a detached and buy a detached, they're not typically going to be the same price. In fact, they're going to be far less. So in that regard, if you only put 3 down, you actually wouldn't be able to maybe satisfy your full 100% reinvestment. So for that reason, that's where you have 200% rule, meaning if I sold my property for $1 million, I get to identify up to $2 million worth of property. So in our example, Texas could look like we could have 6 properties, right, as opposed to 3 using the 3 property rule. So again, most common 3 property rule, but depending on the markets and the price point arbitrage there, you could be using the 200% rule. 95% rule is rarely used. This is typically when we're talking about larger portfolio moves. So I'm not going to get into that and add more information to your brain at the moment, but know that these are the 3 current options for identification. And then just to chop that off, I wanted to give you guys a visual of just what does it look like. Well, hey, look, it's a piece of paper with 3 lines on it to put 3 properties on. Or below that, the 200% rule. So in this case, this is the paper that you're going to be submitting to IPX 1031 or another accommodator you might choose to work with. But in this example, you're going to be filling this out. Make sure it's into Steve.Decker or Jordan Phillips on day 45 or sooner. And therefore, you will be closing escrow on one of these properties on this sheet. It's as simple as filling this out and getting it into them, right? So know that if you're working with us, all these things will be taken care of on your behalf, and that we'll put the best 3 or options in there, or we'll already have a closed escrow on the property. So it's very rare that we're at day 45 and still filling this sheet out. And that's an indication of having the conversations that need to be had and getting clear on exactly what we're looking for before we sell the property. What taxes am I able to defer? Well, I'm glad you asked. A lot of them. For federal taxes, will depend on, of course, your tax bracket, but you'd be looking anywhere from roughly 15 to 20% on capital gains tax. So in most cases, the typical 1031 exchange for a detached home, we're looking at, let's say, $1 million sale. And typically we're looking at clients that have bases that are either fully written off, so they've had all depreciation taken off, or they have a small bit left. So we could be looking at a gain of potentially $800,000. Well, under that principle, right, we could be looking at $160,000 in taxes just for the federal gains part. Now, we also have the state ordinary income tax for California, which we'll go to a more detailed view next, but it's ranging anywhere from 8.84% to 15.8%, depending on your ownership structure, as far as an individual, corporation, LLC. We also have our depreciation recapture. This is one that a lot of people don't recognize, which is that if you've been depreciating your asset each year and you decide to sell the property, well, the IRS wants some of that benefit back, right? So if you write off $500,000, they're going to want 25% of that depreciation benefit back in their pocket. So in that instance, we could be looking at a bill of $125,000 just for the recapture. So $125,000 for the recapture, $125,000 from our federal, right? We're already at over $200,000 in taxes, not including the state of California or the healthcare tax above the AGI 200 for single and 250 for married. Looking to the more detailed view from the state of California, this would be the withholding form that you can expect to fill out when you're in escrow on selling your property. And through these calculations, there's either a flat tax that can be paid, which is 3.33%, which you'll see here on line 30, or you do an itemized computation, which could be helped with your tax person or CPA. Main thing I wanted to convey here was what are the options and what are the tax rates? If you look at individual, corporation, a trust, they're all at roughly 10% or higher in most cases. So if we couple the Fed of 20% with, let's say, 10% here, just for average, with the depreciation recapture, right, we're looking at taxes in excess of 35 to 40%. So that's exactly why we're on this call right now, to make sure that money does not go to the state of California or any state for that matter, or the IRS, and it goes back into your hard work and investment for your family and for your retirement. As we look ahead to the exchange motivators, right? What are the reasons why people elect or choose to take advantage of the 1031 exchange strategy? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Is one of the main things I want to convey here, is that oftentimes people think of a 1031 exchange as a tool or a vehicle to help people force more cash flow, get better returns and Excel sheets and numbers. And well, that's not the reality. The reality is most clients we help are actually not looking for that. A lot of the clients we help are looking to really change their ownership structure depending on what season of the investment cycle they're in. So going through some of these, you can see cash flow, right? That is about money. So who would be looking for cash flow? Well, naturally, you'd be looking for cash flow if you want to subsidize income for work so you can work less, or because you're revving up for a goal to retire at a certain age and have a certain passive income number for yourself. Depreciation is another one that a lot of people don't think about. Yet, if you're in your high income earning years, your goal is to get as much write-offs as possible. Now, this is available to you through cost segregation, right? That's a method that helps you accelerate the depreciation table. So instead of being 27 and a half years, we're looking at bringing some of the components of your property accelerated into 1, 5, or 7 years. Now, what that does is provides a huge write-off amount up front. So if you bought a rental property, you do a cost segregation, of course, speak with your CPA for the qualifications to use the cost segregation method. But this could be something that could yield you $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in tax savings. So it's not money that you're receiving every month in the form of cash flow, yet it is cash flow because it's less money leaving your pocket. So understand you can make a return on investment in many different ways, not just by collecting rent, but sometimes by offsetting income to not have to take money out of your pocket for the IRS. Next is appreciation. So you're looking at markets that maybe you held an asset in a lower appreciating market that's more for cash flow. You want to be putting this into an asset that's in a location like California that has much bigger swings up and down for value plays. Also, if you're in appreciation, that might be something better suited for someone that has a longer time horizon, right? They're not dependent upon the cash flow for the asset because they're in their income earning years, or they already have the cash flow component taken care of. So really at this point, it's just a matter of moving assets for appreciation to build a larger generational wealth pool of money. Conversion. So this is one that I've helped out many clients with, and I believe will continue to become more popular as really the government's giving you the option to essentially convert your rental into a second or forever home, or vice versa, convert your current property into a rental property. This is a great tool for a lot of people that have assets that they no longer need the cash for. They're really just a pain in the butt or a conversation to have with a friend. And they're able to then turn that into something they can actually see, feel, touch, realize, and benefit from in the form of a lifestyle play for a second home or forever. Consolidate or diversify. So consolidation would be a method of taking multiple assets and turning it into one asset. So in this example, this might be someone who has 3 or 4 detached homes that they've acquired throughout, many years, and they're then looking to convert that into an apartment building or maybe a fourplex, so that they have all the management, the costs, and everything centralized into one property. That could save you a lot of time, money, and have some economies of scale to your benefit. Diversify. This might be a situation where you have a lot of assets that are all held in one geographic location. Well, in some cases, as we continue to see more and more extreme weather events, that might not benefit you. If you're in a location that's prone to significant weather events, well, you might not want to have all your assets in a location that has hurricanes or tornadoes, or a big earthquake coming up soon. Who knows? So understand there's a lot of ways you can diversify. It can be geographically diversify. It can be asset type, right? So I'm looking to diversify from residential to multifamily, commercial. There's a lot of different ways you can help plan or strategize within this bucket. Reduce management burdens, right? This is a play for simplicity. Hey, listen, I've been in the active investment phase. I've been the landlord taking care of rents. And at this point, I'm looking to reduce, right, and change from an active to a passive role. That would be a great bucket for you because you're looking for assets that have triple net would be an example where you're not paying any of the extra utilities, amenities, features. The person in the leasehold is taking care of all those components. Or something more passive like a fund, where essentially you have a team of professionals that are managing the asset and the money and then cutting you a check every month for mailbox money. Estate planning. This is going to continue to become a bigger and bigger category as our population continues to age. But it's really being able to properly plan out your assets using the 1031 exchange. Now, I know everyone says they have a trust and their kids are going to inherit it. However, the reality is a lot of kids don't want to inherit real estate, and they don't want to be landlords, and they don't want to have to deal with it. So if you're in that bucket, this is an opportunity for you to essentially bless your family with planning out and reallocating, right, where your properties might be, maybe putting them in locations that are closer to where your family members are, or just putting it in place so that there's not a mess for your family to try to figure out they didn't know about beforehand. Lastly, use some profession. This would be a great one for someone like myself, where I can take one of my rentals that's a detached home and look for a space where it could be mixed use, where I'm currently at here on 30th Street. It's got office spaces in the front and residential units in the back. That way it allows me to be the owner of my office and of real estate through the 1031 exchange. So as you can see, there's a lot of reasons why someone might consider using a 1031 exchange, and this might not even cover all of them. So use this as a tool to get more familiar with the way of thinking of what you can do, what's possible. A lot of times people just don't understand that all these options are a consideration, or they haven't been thinking that way. And so that's why I love this tool and this conversation, because there's so many strategic benefits you can realize from this when executed with a well-intentioned plan and with a bigger picture in mind. So I want to get into the help your child or family buy a home. And for me to get into that and take it away, I'm going to go ahead and cut into my clip here with a good partner of mine, Steve.Decker with IPX 1031. Okay, awesome. I am joined with Steve.Decker with IPX 1031, and I'm excited for us to be really allowing Steve to help educate our audience about some of the more advanced 1031 exchange strategies available to you. And although we're on a 1031 exchange beginner crash course, I really wanted to mention these because of just the state of the market right now. Obviously, with how expensive things are, kids getting into the real estate market looking for options to own, and then also recognizing there's a lot of clients that have a lot of rentals that they didn't mean for them to be rentals, but they've done really well over the past 30 years, and now they've got a briefcase full of over $1 million of equity, and they don't know that they can actually help themselves or their kids out in some regard. So Steve, thank you for helping our audience out here with this. And I just want to get right into the third-party buyer exchanges.
Let's do it.
Right? So parent has a detached home, let's say, and their kids are struggling for a down payment to save in this current economic conditions, but they don't recognize that there might be a chance that the parents might be able to help fund a purchase that satisfies both of them, correct?
Yeah, that absolutely is possible in some cases with a 1031 exchange. From the parents' standpoint, since the parents are the ones that are doing the exchange, they have to both sell investment real estate and purchase investment real estate. But there are some cases where kids or grandkids or nieces and nephews or other family members could buy along with, in this example, mom and dad.
Right.
And become a partial owner of the replacement property in the exchange. So yeah, that is doable in some cases.
So we'll set up a quick visual for everyone here, right? We have parents that are selling a $1 million detached home, and their son or daughter is looking to get into the real estate market or ownership. There's a couple different, there's a lot of options for them, correct? I mean, they could reinvest into a detached home, they could buy a multifamily, they could do a detached with an ADU, anything that allows them where they still have investment position, right? Because exchanges are, whether it's for investment or business use, is the primary function. And then they're able to essentially take that as long as their kids are paying fair market value. So if you want to just walk us through, Steve, what that would look like. Let's say they sell $1 million property, they buy a $1.5 million house with ADU, or a 3-unit property, right? Any of these are applicable here in San Diego as far as that price point goes.
Yeah, so if mom and dad sell a property for $1 million, we know that in order for them to be completely tax deferred, they need to end up owning at least $1 million worth of whatever they buy. So using your example, like let's say they sell for 1 million and they want to buy a property that's $1.5 million, and let's just say their daughter in this example wants to buy into that property with them. So in that example, the parents would need to own at least $1 million worth of that $1.5 million property. So they would need to own at least 2/3 of the property, for this example's sake.
In
And
order
then,
for them to own 2/3 of it, right, then they want to make sure it's tenants in common. So they have this
correct.
fractional, so to speak, ownership of it.
Yeah, that's really important. They want to make sure that the two owners are tenants in common, on the ownership, because mom and dad have to be able to report the property they sell and the property they buy on the same tax return for 1031 purposes. So they don't want to like create a new partnership or corporation that adds the daughter to the fold. So they'll go out and they'll buy that new single family home with the ADU or
Yep.
triplex or whatever it is. They'll chip in their $1 million. Daughter will bring in the other $500,000. They'll go on title. Mom and dad will own 2/3. Daughter will own 1/3. They'll be tenants in common. And then, Nick, you're right. There are really typically two things that a CPA will want to see in the case where one of your family members is occupying the property that you're buying through the exchange. The first is fair market rent, right? So in this case, the daughter is occupying 2/3 of a property that is not owned by her. It's owned by mom and dad. So daughter would technically have to pay fair market rent for whatever 2/3 of a $1.5 million property is. And she would need to make that payment to mom and dad. And then the second step is we need to make sure mom and dad also report that income on their taxes,
Right,
right?
right.
So yeah, as long as the daughter's paying fair market rent and mom and dad are reporting the income on their taxes, that should be fine from a CPA's standpoint.
And not to make it more confusing, but we've also had instances where tax professionals are also allowing people to just pay the phantom tax, meaning they pay the 7%, if they were out of state owners, and as if they're getting the full rent, but there might not be a full rent, right? Actual cash flow occurring. So there's a couple nuances in that, and obviously we'll defer to the CPAs and tax professionals for that.
Yep.
But main point being, there's strategies that you can help with, right? Your kids getting into home ownership and being able to see the benefit and joy of that now, rather than waiting until you pass away and then they get the benefit where you don't get to see that. So this is something too, in an environment where real estate's expensive, right? It's difficult for people to save up for a down payment in San Diego, right? And not end up being 50 years old by the time they actually accumulate what they need. So
Right.
this helps expedite this, right? This is like a forced purchase play. Now, on the flip side, there is a downside, right, from a tax standpoint. And Steve, that's the one thing I want to be clear of too, is that obviously in doing this, there's a lot of benefits to come from it. But on the backside, there's not the full step up in basis that will be retained by the sibling or siblings upon passing.
That is correct. Yeah. So using that same example that we were just working on, when mom and dad, pass away, hopefully many, many years from now, the basis will only get stepped up on the 2/3 of the property that they owned.
Right.
So the daughter would still be, an owner of that piece of real estate, would still have a 1/3 ownership interest. So the 1/3 that the daughter owns, unfortunately, would not get that step up. But the 2/3 that mom and dad owned and then subsequently passed along to their kids or grandkids or whomever, the 2/3 would get the step up. So it wouldn't be 100% step up, but it would still be a step up, which is a hell of a lot better than a kick in the teeth. So
Yeah, well, so it's really a trade-off, right? It's
Yeah.
You have the benefit of being able to do this to help your kids out, and in return, the cost of that is, right, not the full step up in basis.
That's right.
So, and then that's a great example for people, and there's a lot of other ways you can go about doing this within that same framework. So if you have questions about this, please reach out. Steve, obviously their team does hundreds of these every week, so safe to say they might have some great feedback for you. And jumping on to similar in the same thread here of other exchange, right, options or strategies. We talked about the tenants in common sale for more of like a multifamily or friend type setup where, hey, we want to, me and my brother want to buy this, or me and my friends want to buy this second home where our families can go enjoy it from time to time. That's an option for you that you can, right, evaluate for a 1031 exchange if it's set up the right way. So,
Yeah.
Steve, what would that
So
look like to be set up the appropriate way to actually work?
So we got to be careful with second homes, right? Because second homes and primary residences technically don't qualify for 1031 exchanges, but you can buy a property through a 1031 exchange that you eventually plan on making your second home or even your primary residence. The regs for that are, you sell your property, you exchange it for another property, and then for the next 24 months, the property that you bought through the exchange has to be continued to be held for either investment purposes or in the productive use of your business or trade. Now, after that 24 months is up, Nick, if you and your brother want to occupy that property, make it a second home, your family lives there half the year, his family lives there half the year, that's actually perfectly fine. But you are right. Tenancy in common is probably a good idea for a structure like that, because when it comes time for you guys to eventually sell, now, you may not be in love with that property forever. Right now, you've got young kids, and
Yeah.
you want a killer pad on the lake somewhere, right? But as the family grows up, you might realize, wow, that lake house is more trouble than it's worth. It may be time to divest, right? It's time to sell that asset. Well, if you own the
And this is
property,
where it's equally important, right, Steve? Is that
yeah,
it's on the front
absolutely.
side and the back side with this tenants in common structure.
That's right. That's right. Because the tenancy in common, when it does come time to sell the property, years from now, you and your brother have the ability to go your separate directions. You can sell the property. If he wants to cash out, bite the bullet, pay his pro rata share of tax, he could do that. And if you, Nick, wanted to take your money, as long as it's no longer a second home, you've converted it back to an investment property for a couple of years. If you wanted to sell that property and exchange it for, a ranch in Texas, you could go ahead and do that. So tenancy in common really gives the two or three parties that are on title the flexibility to go in their separate directions when it comes time to sell the real estate.
And yeah, the main thing we want to convey here is just if it's set up the right way, there's a lot of flexibility within the right framework, right? So long as you're in the investment business use framework, and then you've got it set up on title the appropriate way, then you can kind of decouple, couple as needed, right, within this structure, which is important because that gives you a lot more freedom than alternative options like a partnership where no, you started this way, and then if you're going to reinvest, right, you're going to have to reinvest in that partnership and evaluate options to strip that down the road in a couple of
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, you're either going to have to keep that partnership intact or you're going to have to plan with significant time in advance. I mean, a
Right.
lot of times people come to me and they say, okay, Steve, I've got a partnership that owns an office building. There's three members of the partnership. We're getting ready to sell the property and we want to go in our separate directions. Well, and that can be very problematic because when you do an exchange, you've got to be able to, again, report the property you sell and buy on the same tax return. Most people don't plan far enough in advance of their sale to properly drop the property out of the partnership, put it into tenants in common, and then season the asset, which in a perfect world, you would do a full 12 months before you sell your real estate. But guys like me and you, we don't ever plan a year in advance of when we're going to sell our real estate. We look at the market and we're like, wait a second, it's hot, it's time to sell, let's get moving. Uh,
Right. Well,
so
this is
there,
another great example of why it's important to be having these conversations so far in advance. And if you're on this call and some of this might pertain to you, have a conversation with Steve or myself now, even if it's next year, later next year, because we're just trying to make sure that everything has the right ingredients so that you can put together your frosty cake
that's right. That's
and
right.
eat it.
We don't want to get
You
to the
can cook
finish
it
line and
and you
have a
can bake
problem.
it and eat it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and then the other one was just it's very similar. These are all very similar, right? Third party buyer exchanges, tenants in common sales, related party exchanges, family swaps. How to make related parties unrelated to avoid restrictions on properties. Now, there's a lot going on there in those kind of, right? The tax game here, and then kind of within the family helping each other to alleviate that burden and be strategic about it. Is this something that you see as far as very common with families or friends or some format doing this type of related party exchange setup?
Yeah, so related party issues do come up on a pretty regular basis. And the analogy that I use is the IRS used an atom bomb to kill an anthill, right? The reason that the IRS frowns upon related party transactions is because they're worried about what's called basis shifting. So they're basically worried about people illegally skirting their tax burdens, right? So
Essentially, they're trading just to ratchet up their basis.
correct.
So that when they
Correct.
do something, there's no taxable event.
That's right. That's right. So, the IRS typically does not want you to buy a property from a direct related party through a 1031 exchange. Now, when I say direct related party, I always tell people to think of, your family tree as like a cross or a plus sign, right? You don't want to buy from anybody directly above you on the family tree. So don't buy from your parents or your grandparents. Don't buy from anybody directly below you on the family tree, your kids, your grandkids, and don't buy from anybody directly to side, which would be siblings, right? But if we're talking about uncles, cousins, second cousins, distant relatives, you're probably in the clear as far as buying from a related party. Now, every now and then, though, we have clients that say, you know what, Steve, to heck with you. I'm going to buy an investment property from my brother. Can I do this as an exchange? I always tell them the words that come out of my mouth the most when these transactions come up is, hey, look, go get the blessing from your CPA, because it's not going to be Steve.Decker that backs you in an audit.
Correct.
And in fact, when you report your 1031 exchange on your taxes, you're going to complete a form called an 8824. And the entire second section of that 8824 is questions about whether this was a related party transaction. So typically the IRS is only gives the blessing for you to buy from a direct related party if that related party is also then going to do a 1031 exchange. So like, let's say Nick and I are brothers, right? And Nick sells a rental property and he comes to me and he says, Steve, I really like your rental property that you own in Los Angeles. I want to buy your rental property in LA through my 1031 exchange. Well, the only way that really works, it's like ironclad to work for Nick, is if I then do a 1031 exchange when I sell LA and go buy yet another piece of investment property from, in this case, somebody that is unrelated to me.
Okay.
So be careful with the related party transactions. The IRS is pretty aggressive coming after those. But we defer to your tax advisor. If you say, look, let's roll with it, we'll give it the old college try. So
essentially, basically, just make sure, again, you do your homework, you lay things out, you plan in advance, and make sure that everything is blessed by your CPA's magic wand.
You got it.
And we'll all be very happy we attended this call and made some right decisions.
That's right.
Steve, thanks for your time, man. And we'll be
Anytime.
sure to let the audience know of all your information should they have questions or need your help with an exchange. Sound good?
I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity, Nick. Thanks,
awesome. Guys. Thanks as always, Steve. Appreciate it.
You got it. Take care.
Cheers. Let's close it out with a quick recap of the benefits of a 1031 exchange. So we talked about the ability to defer all capital gains with both the federal gains tax of 15 to 20%, the state taxes, depending on where you're located, but for the state of California, between roughly 9 to 16%. Apply all the proceeds from your replacement property to increase your buying power, right? So a leverage up. Leverage up with equity or capital that otherwise would have been paid to your state or the government in order for you to own a better asset with more wealth opportunity and larger income. Provides a greater diversity or consolidation to upgrade your investment, right? It just gives you more flexibility to have money that's not being paid out in order for you to be able to consider different positions, ownership structures, and serve you in the now. We have a lot of properties and ownership things that we bought many, many years ago or decades ago, but they don't really serve us anymore. So this is a great example of ways where you can take what you have and use it to help you reinvest into something that solves a current problem, need, or better yet, helps a family member out. So as we talked about with helping a child or an immediate family member out, there's plenty of options where you can actually use that money to reinvest and help someone accomplish homeownership at the same time. Lastly, this is a great tool for estate planning. There's a lot of conversations that don't be had when someone's alive. Why not enjoy the benefit of helping your kids out, helping your family out now. Why wait when you're not here and you don't get to enjoy it? Take advantage of this opportunity. If you're sitting here right now wondering why you still own that property, right? That's a cash cow on paper, but really doesn't need it anymore. It doesn't serve you anymore. Now, listen, there's a lot of cases where maybe doing nothing might be the answer as well. But what's most important about this call is just getting educated on what all your options are and making informed decisions, even if that means not doing a 1031 exchange. Our goal today was to make certain that you have a baseline understanding of what a 1031 exchange is and how it works so that you can empower yourself, your family, your friends to take advantage of the opportunities that the IRS has given to you. So I trust you guys got a lot of great information, insights out of here. And I look forward to expanding on this in the coming months with our upcoming calls. As we look ahead to September, we're going to do a quick spotlight on the state of our market here in San Diego County. So on this call, I'm going to break down really what's going on. How many houses are for sale? What's the demand as far as pending contracts go? Where has prices gone over the past couple months? We'll be sure to pull up some trend lines, all kinds of good stuff, so you can just see where you're at and where we might be heading next in order for you to evaluate whether selling or buying this fall might make sense for you. So be sure to register for the call, and we look forward to seeing you then. Outside of that, if you need help understanding your options, we want to make sure you know some of the things we can provide for you. Complimentary asset performance test. Let's get clear on what your property is currently performing at. What is the net profit you're realizing? And is there an opportunity for improvement? It's better to know than not know. Schedule an exploratory call or an exchange strategy session. Right? If you get on this call, you recognize that there might be something out there that you didn't otherwise think about. We're happy to go through what your options are specific to your scenario. Direct offer, we offer an option to buy your property without commission and on a flexible timeline. So some clients have really appreciated this because they're completing a 1031 exchange, and we've been able to structure an agreement that allows them a flexible close date to ensure they fulfill a successful replacement property. Lastly, if you'd like to access our past calls or upcoming wealth calls, feel free to check them all out. We've got years and years worth of great education and information for you to access on our YouTube channel. Outside of that, again, Nick Emerson with the Emerson Group. Glad to have you guys on the call today. Look forward to continuing the conversation and providing value and education within this space, however you might need it. Outside of that, have a wealthy rest of your week. Take care.